The Los Angeles Dodgers have never been a team that hesitates. When the moment demands action, the organization moves, quietly, swiftly, and without mercy. President Andrew Friedman built this franchise on one unshakable principle: no player, no matter how beloved, is bigger than the team. And this week, that principle shook Dodger Stadium to its very foundation. Because the name that appeared on the trade list was not some forgotten bench player. It was not a struggling reliever or an aging utility man. The name that circulated through the halls of Chavez Ravine, whispered at first, then spoken in disbelief, was Freddie Freeman. The $250 million superstar. The heart of the Dodgers lineup. The man who hit one of the most dramatic home runs in World Series history. That Freddie Freeman was now reportedly on the trade block. And with him, another name that shocked the organization even further, Teoscar Hernandez, whose blazing speed and clutch hitting had made him one of the most exciting players in baseball. The Dodgers were not just making a move. They were potentially dismantling their own soul. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire across every platform. Twitter exploded. Instagram feeds were flooded. Baseball fans across America stared at their screens in disbelief, refreshing for updates, praying it was a rumor. But it was not a rumor. And the story behind this decision was far darker, far more complicated, and far more human than anyone could have imagined. To understand why Freeman's name appeared on that list, you have to understand the Dodgers' current reality. On paper, Los Angeles remains one of the most powerful rosters in all of baseball. Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Clayton Kershaw, Freddie Freeman. The names alone are enough to make opposing managers lose sleep. But behind the glamour and the championship banners, a quiet storm had been building inside the organization for weeks. Sources close to the team revealed that internal tensions had been rising steadily since the middle of the season. The clubhouse, once a model of unity and professionalism, had begun to fracture along invisible lines. Veteran players clashed with the front office over contract decisions. Young talent felt overlooked. And Freeman, who had long served as the emotional anchor of the locker room, found himself caught directly in the middle. The breaking point came during a closed-door meeting between Friedman and the team's senior leadership. According to sources familiar with the conversation, Friedman entered the room with a single agenda: restructuring the roster to prepare for what he called the next chapter of Dodgers baseball. Those 4 words sent a chill through every person in that room. Because everyone understood what they meant. Someone was going home. Freeman learned about the trade discussions the same way everyone else did, through a text message from his agent. He was sitting in the training room, icing his ankle after a long practice session, when his phone buzzed. He read the message once. Then again. Then set the phone down on the table and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Those who saw him in the minutes that followed described a man who looked as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Freeman has always carried himself with extraordinary composure. He is not a player who wears his emotions on his sleeve. But on that afternoon, even his legendary calm could not mask the weight of what he had just learned. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually warm and focused, carried something heavier. Something that looked, to those who knew him well, dangerously close to betrayal. He dressed quietly, gathered his things, and walked directly to Friedman's office without speaking to anyone along the way. The walk through the corridor felt longer than usual. Players glanced up as he passed, sensing immediately that something was wrong. No one said a word. The meeting between Freeman and Friedman lasted nearly 40 minutes. No one outside that room knows exactly what was said. But those who passed by the closed door reported that voices were raised at least once, and that the silence that followed was somehow even louder than the argument itself. When Freeman finally emerged, his expression had returned to that familiar mask of calm. But his eyes told a different story. He walked past his teammates without making eye contact, stopped briefly at his locker, and then headed for the exit. As he reached the door, he paused. Without turning around, in a voice just barely loud enough to be heard, he said one sentence that would later echo through every sports broadcast in the country. "I gave this city everything I had." Then the door closed behind him. News of Freeman's reaction spread through the clubhouse within minutes. And it landed differently on different people. Some players exchanged uncomfortable glances, unsure of whose side to take. Others pulled out their phones, already aware that this story was far bigger than the walls of Dodger Stadium. The veterans in the room grew quiet, each one privately calculating what this decision meant for their own futures. But it was the younger players who felt it most intensely. For them, Freeman was not just a teammate. He was proof that loyalty and hard work were rewarded in this organization. He was the player who stayed after World Series games to sign autographs for children. He was the first one to pull a struggling rookie aside and offer quiet encouragement. He was, in every meaningful sense of the word, the conscience of this team. And now the organization was considering trading him away like a line item in a budget spreadsheet. Suspicion began to settle into the room like fog. Eyes moved differently. Conversations dropped to whispers. The trust that championship teams are built on, that invisible, fragile, absolutely essential trust, had developed its first crack. Then came the second name. Rushing. If Freeman's inclusion on the trade list was a shock, the addition of another key piece sent the clubhouse into genuine turmoil. The message was now impossible to ignore. This was not a minor roster adjustment. This was a statement. The Dodgers were rebuilding their identity around something new, something that had not yet fully revealed itself. And they were willing to sacrifice beloved figures to do it. Manager Dave Roberts faced reporters later that afternoon with the composed, measured expression he always wears in difficult moments. He chose his words carefully, as he always does. He acknowledged that the organization was exploring options. He praised Freeman's contributions without hesitation. He emphasized that roster decisions were made in the best interest of the team's long-term vision. But reporters in that room heard something beneath his careful words. A quiet sadness. The kind that lives in the voice of a man who did not make the decision but must stand publicly and defend it. Roberts has always been a manager who protects his players. And something in his eyes that afternoon suggested that this was one decision he would carry with him for a very long time. And then the $250 million superstar arrived. While the Dodgers were managing the internal fallout of Freeman's potential departure, a different kind of energy was building at the edges of the organization. Because the move that Freeman had been quietly engineering for weeks was finally taking shape. A superstar of rare and undeniable caliber was being brought in to reshape the Dodgers' future. A player whose combination of talent, athleticism, and market value had made him one of the most coveted names in baseball for the better part of 2 seasons. The details of the deal were staggering. The contract figures alone were enough to rearrange the financial landscape of the entire league. When the signing was confirmed, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Fans who had been devastated by the Freeman news suddenly found themselves pulled in 2 directions at once, grieving a beloved icon while simultaneously electrified by the arrival of a generational talent. This is the genius, and the cruelty, of how Andrew Friedman operates. He never simply takes something away. He replaces it. He forces the fan base, the media, and the players themselves to hold 2 contradictory emotions at the same time, loss and excitement, grief and anticipation. It is uncomfortable. It is disorienting. And it almost always works. Back inside the clubhouse, Mookie Betts had seen enough. The 2-time champion and undisputed leader of the Dodgers' competitive spirit had spent the afternoon watching his teammates fracture in real time. He had watched Freeman leave. He had watched the younger players retreat into uncertainty. He had watched the room he loved begin to lose the thing that made it dangerous, belief. Betts stood up from his locker without announcement. The room went quiet almost immediately, because Mookie Betts does not speak unless he means it. When he does, people listen. His voice was low, but it filled every corner of that locker room. I don't care what the front office decides. I don't care what the headlines say tonight. What I care about is what happens in that dugout. What happens between the lines. We have a job to do. Freeman taught us how to do that job with class. We honor him by doing it the same way. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The words landed like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples through every person in that room. On social media, the reaction was unlike anything the Dodgers organization had seen in years. Within 3 hours of the initial report, Freeman's name was the #1 trending topic across every major platform. Fans created tribute videos overnight. Former players weighed in with statements of support. Baseball analysts filled emergency broadcast segments with debate about what this move meant for the franchise's identity. The question that dominated every conversation was simple and brutal: had the Dodgers just made the smartest move in baseball? Or had they just made the worst mistake of the Freeman era? Some argued that roster evolution is the price of sustained excellence. That sentiment is the enemy of championships. That Freeman himself would understand, because champions always understand. Others argued that some players transcend transactions. That certain names carry meaning beyond statistics and salary figures. That what Freeman represented to this organization could not be replaced by any dollar amount, no matter how staggering. Both sides were right. And that is exactly what made this moment so devastating. Tonight, the lights of Dodger Stadium burn as brightly as ever. The roster will be announced. The decisions will be made official. A new chapter of Dodgers baseball is about to begin, whether the fan base is ready for it or not.